Hello, everybody, and welcome to Book Passages Conversations with Authors. I'm your host, Paula Farmer. Happy to be here with you. As always, Book Passage really appreciates your support of these events, whether they're virtual like this today or in our stores. We have a store in San Francisco and in Corte Madera. We're happy to present many live events in our stores. But we do appreciate your support of our virtual events like today. Speaking of which, I know today could be kind of hard for a lot of people, whether you're watching live or a little bit later. But I think in light of these recent events, today's event is especially timely and could prove to be very hopeful and helpful. I think of late, people have been especially ramped up on their devices. And we are talking today about sensory overload. Our featured book by Dr. Richard Cytowic is titled Your Stone Age Brain in the Screen Age, Coping with Digital Distraction and Sensory Overload. In it, he draws an easily comprehensible picture of the Stone Age brain's workings, the function of neurotransmitters like dopamine and basic instincts for survival, such as desire and reward. It's full of practical actions that we can start taking to heart right away, and we probably should. Your Stone Age Brain in the Screen Age offers compelling evidence that we can change the way we interact with technology. Dr. Richard Cytowic is a pioneering researcher in his field and a professor of neurology at George Washington University. He has written several other books, brain-related book topics, including the neurological side of neuropsychology. Try to say that 10 times fast after the night I've had. I dare you. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Richard's very capable hands on this topic. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you for those tongue twisters.
I know. Please tell us more about your book, how we should approach it, what it can help all of us with collectively and individually.
Well, your Stone Age Brain in the Screen Age tries to put things in perspective that the modern brains are no different than they were from our distant ancestors 3 million years ago. And so there are certain limitations, and especially in terms of energy. So, for example, the brain is an energy hog. It consumes 20% of our daily calories, but only constitutes 20% of our daily weight. And most of the energy goes to maintaining the physical structure, maintaining, pumping sodium, potassium, ions across membranes. And that leaves very little energy left over for thought, mental thought, which is what everybody's interested in. And so what do we do with this extremely thin margin that we're left with today? It's been proven time and time again that we are terrible at multitasking. We cannot do two things at once. It's just impossible. If we try to force ourselves to do this, we become very fatigued quite early on. I mean, and one of the reasons is that we're trying to multitask. One of the most energy intensive things that the brain can do is shift from one thing to another, from A to B to C to back to A to C, and it's like wasting energy. And a great example of this is the famous Oscar fiasco, in which Andrew Cunanan of Price Waterhouse announced the wrong winner for Best Picture. And he was a very well-known Twitterer, and he was tweeting about Emma Stone as she was walking off the opposite end of the stage, And that's exactly when he should have been discarding his envelope and queuing up the next one. And so that shows that you can't do two things at once. It's just impossible. And yet, why is it that so many people insist that they can push through all this, and as if as if a pot of coffee and diets and supplements and exercise and Sudoku puzzles is going to increase their brain energy? It's not. It just can't.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the multitasking, because I feel like in our society today, it's kind of a badge of honor if you can multitask or you think that you can. I think employers expect you to. And I remember up until very recently, I would have it like on a cover letter that I'm great at this.
Ah.
And so I love that you're actually showing us that's not necessarily a positive thing, and most
But all
people can't
the
do it.
research shows that everybody's terrible at it. And yet, even when individuals are shown how terrible they are at multitasking, they deny it and they say, "Oh, no, 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 I'm good at it. No, I really am." And it's like, why is there this denial about your limitations? It's like people can't accept how bad they are at something. And I mean, that to me, that's a very puzzling kind of thing.
Well, and for me, it sounds like you're saying it's not abnormal. It doesn't mean that you're like, it's not a character flaw. It's just what the brain is capable of or not. And
Exactly, that you're
yeah,
asking it to do, is like asking you to knit 3 rows at once when you can only do one. You just can't do it. So, I mean, there we go. Uh,
yeah.
the other thing about is these digital distractions is it's like secondhand smoke. Um, and we all know about secondhand smoke, how it affects everybody within range, children, etc. And but you've seen this effect in waiting rooms and airport lounges all the time. Is that if there's a screen on, it demands to be looked at, and it's very hard not to look at it. In fact, trying not to look at it is exacting an amount of energy from you that you really don't have to spare, but it's sucking this out of you. So yeah, this is the example of secondhand smoke, that screens everywhere are demanding to be looked at. And if you go to a city like New York and several of the intersections where you've got these huge 6-story displays of LED screens blaring at you, uh, you can't escape it. The advertisers call this street furniture, where you've got kiosks. You walk down the street and you've got kiosks that are showing you advertisements that are rotating on the screen. And if you're walking at a reasonable pace, you see, 2 or 3 cycles in a loop, and there's no escape from them.
And what is it doing? What is it negatively doing
Well,
exactly?
in the book, I go into this in detail in the book. For example, drivers who encounter these kind of bright screens, they have difficulty. They have much slower braking reactions than otherwise. So it's dangerous. We're just courting accidents because of this distraction. And even and of course, and in Europe. This kind of street furniture which is now common in airport concourses. They're looking at you with artificial intelligence, and they're recognizing your face, and they're recognizing your nationality or hearing what you're speaking, and they can target an ad at you in your own language, in any way that they feel is relevant to you. This is very much like the scene of Tom Cruise in Minority Report, where he's running through the concourse and all these ads are being beamed at him that are quite personalized. And that's no longer fiction, it's reality.
Well, and on a smaller level, it's reality with smaller screens like your laptop, your phone. The algorithms figure out, oh, you want this advertising, and they're doing all these target,
I
you
know,
know.
and it's so hard to escape from.
Yep.
There's almost no way to sort of block them and say, no, don't do this. It takes an awful lot to drill down into all the security settings that say, no, don't do this to me. Don't. Uh, and most people, they just don't have the patience to do that. And so they're at a loss and they're at the mercy of these companies that, the tech companies know that there are only 1,440 minutes in a day, and they vie for our eyeballs ruthlessly. They want to have our attention as much as they can. And in many cases, they win.
And is there a difference between, is it just a matter of how often you're on these devices looking at screens and how long you're doing it? Or does anything related to age and generational, as far as your brain, factor into if it's worse for some people than others?
Well, I think it's much worse for younger people because young people have no defenses against this. They're just, instead of playing patty cake and so big and games, restaurant and games like that, they're having these screen devices talk at them, not with them. And that's the problem, you see. If you're a child who's just developing his emotional intelligence and language and all that, then you want an adult who is speaking to you in full sentences and engaging you and all that. But screens don't engage a child. They don't speak to him in the same way that a normal person does. So I mean, I say that the iPad is the worst babysitter in the world, and that to put an iPad hanging over a bassinet or in front of a car seat or an iPod is the worst form of child abuse. I think it's just absolutely evil and dreadful, because what you're doing is you are blocking the developing central vision of a young individual. And there's no way that they're going to recover from that.
Yeah, can we take that to kind of the next generation of the babies and the toddlers, and take it to like teenagers and 20-something-year-olds that have been raised in this type of technology and are very engaged in it? Does that make a
Well,
difference
I
between
mean,
them?
I think that's a great question, but I don't think we don't have the research to know that. I mean, it makes sense that if you've been exposed to screens all your life and you have no, well, here's the thing: is that when you get to grade school, kids, they don't know how to talk to one another. They have no ability to make small talk. They can't speak to their peers. All they know is how to answer a text. I mean, they're freaked out when the doorbell rings. It's like, oh, they expect somebody to text, I'm here now outside. It's like, or a telephone ringing. They just absolutely are freaked out. They don't know what to do. It's like, well, pick up the phone and talk to the person. No, no. So they're terrified at direct communication. I think in all sorts of ways. And so this goes on from adolescents to teenagers and even young college age kids, is that they don't know how to talk with one another. they do not know how to make human contact anymore.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting that the things we take for granted that the younger generation has no context for. I think we were talking earlier as far as like even, uh, now there's more of a kind of a trend towards going back to vinyl records.
Mm.
We were raised with vinyl records and were raised in
Oh, the
listening
Beatles'
to
White
whole
Album, yes.
listening to the whole album versus just what you've downloaded, which I have plenty on my phone, single songs, but I'm glad I have experienced whole albums. But I realize there's like one or two generations that have not really experienced that unless they happen to be getting into the trend of vinyl records now. So I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit, the whole concept of analog versus digital generation, what they're losing, reading a book that you mentioned earlier, like reading a book and finishing it, that sense of
The
satisfaction.
finishability of a book, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's just the pleasure of going through that. And you mention albums and all that, and for somebody who like me who likes classical music, um, things like Pandora and Spotify are just maddening because you want to listen to a Beethoven or a Bach thing, and they say, "Well, what album is that?" Well, Beethoven never made albums. There's this endless composers and directors that made these things, and so it doesn't work for classical music. But so for young people, yeah, I think they're missing an awful lot and not understanding what it's like to engage in what I call linear thinking. That is to gulp more than a screenful at a time, to be able to engage in a long form argument from beginning to end. Um, and the pleasure that goes along with being able to do that.
Oh, for sure. It's almost indescribable. It's just it has to be experienced.
Well,
Uh,
William Styron, the novelist, said that at the when you're finished reading a novel, there's just a an exhaustion that comes at the end that is so pleasurable because you've gotten to the end of it.
mhm. So it's not in a case like that, it's not necessarily dopamine, right? That's like energizing you, a
No,
pulse
that
of
would be that would
energy.
be that would be that would be the opiates, the
Oh,
reward.
okay.
Yeah, that say, oh, this has been really great.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
dopamine is, everybody thinks of it as the reward mechanism, reward molecule, but it's really the desire molecule.
Oh, okay. So, and what is the one that is reward then? So one is desire and what is reward?
One is desire, one is reward. Yeah.
Got it. Oh, that's so interesting. You're right. We do have our terms mixed up, and it's just become acceptable.
And
Um,
everybody says, "Oh, I've got a dopamine hit, dopamine hit," and you read all these people who are talking about brain hacking, and you've got him boosting up your dopamine levels. Well, you can't boost up your dopamine levels. I mean, you could take Prozac, I suppose, but you can change your brain transmitters by just having a cup of coffee and breakfast in the morning. There's nothing special about these things. Um, we're changing our brain transmitters all the time in the way that we live from moment to moment. So I think we've made an awful lot about uh, about the importance of these neurotransmitters. Yeah, for a neuroscientist like me, yeah, they're interesting, but for the average person, they shouldn't be. I think that the what's being said about them is just way too glib.
yeah. And before we get into obviously solutions and balance and all that, I also wanted to touch on, as someone who is guilty of the whole sensations you get from binging something. I mean, on one hand, I'm a reader, a very avid reader, but on the other hand, yes, I have gotten into the same craze that a lot of people have, the addiction of binging a TV series or something.
Yes.
It really does feel like an addiction because you finish watching it and you're like, I want more, I want more.
I confess I have binged Netflix series, and it's like one episode. Well, let me see the next one. Well, what's the next one? Oh, there's only two more to go. I might as well stay awake and watch them. It's like even I am not immune to this siren call that's bewitching us.
And but what's going on with our brains when we give into that a lot? If we give into that binging, kind of chasing that binging, feel the sensation you get from doing that. What exactly is
Well, if
going on?
we give into it all the time, then I think we don't have any hope of
Yeah.
regaining our sanity. So you can give into it from time to time, as I do, and know that I am giving into it. That this is what I'm doing, and I've decided to do it. But I'm not going to do it every single night from now on. So it's a question of where you draw the line.
And you're bringing up a good point, and kind of the next thing I wanted to get into. We can talk about all the obvious, somewhat obvious. I think now they've become so seamless in our lives. It's very acceptable. The binging, the being on the screens, the scrolling. But can we talk, since we know it's not going away. None of that's going away anytime soon, if ever. What is the best way to handle it in our lives, regardless of age? Like, is it all about balance and being very aware of the time?
I think the first thing is to admit that the forces of big tech are so aligned against us and can overwhelm uh, our resistance much more than we can resist their intrusion. So that's step one. All right, now that you've acknowledged that, what are you going to do? How are you going to defend yourself against it? So there are things like, well, deciding that you're only going to look at for example, for me, I only look at my email at 4 a.m. I'm a very early riser, I confess, at 4 a.m. and again at 4 p.m. And beyond that, if you can't reach me, then you're never going to be able to reach me. And if there's anything really important, I'll find out about it eventually. There's nothing so urgent that I need to know about it right this moment. The other thing is that as much as I can do it, and it's becoming increasingly hard, is to just unsubscribe and turn off every single notification that I get all over the place. It's really become really difficult. Somebody's got to come up for a way to just find a way to stop all this garbage getting through, our email and text messages. So I think that's one way. And what was the rest of your question?
Is it a matter, because we know it's not going to go away. Technology isn't taking a backseat anytime soon. Just the best way for us to deal with it, to protect our brain, to
Yeah.
prioritize
So the
well-being.
best way is to say no to it. Just stop. I'm not going to play your game. Because if you do, you're never going to have any mental peace of mind. Um, this whole intrusion of screens in our lives has become so overwhelming, that we've got to push back with it with as much force as we can.
Yeah, but it sounds to me like the first, maybe really the first step is being aware I think,
Exactly. First,
people become so
being
oblivious.
aware of being aware of how strong these forces are aligned against you. They want nothing more than your attention every second of the day, and they're not going to relent unless they have it. And so, are you going to say, "Oh yes, of course you can bombard me nonstop all the time," or are you going to say, "Forget it. You're not going to do it. Stop."
Yeah. And obviously we're here promoting your book and we're book passage. Well, but we're book passage and we love books. I would think a
But we
good,
love to read. We love to read linear books from
right,
the first cover to the last. We're
right.
interested
Well,
in
maybe
long
that's a
form.
solution for people. Tell them, look, okay, we know you're going to be binging your TV shows, but maybe instead of binging 3 a week, you binge 2 and you read a book or something.
I mean, that this is a great antidote for all this distraction, is to learn to read long form fiction or nonfiction. And you can start with, the New Yorker, an article in the Economist, or anywhere, the New York Times. So just, take something that's more than just a paragraph long and follow it from start to finish. Do you have enough attention span to get through 5, 6, 7, 8 paragraphs? If you don't, man, you are really in trouble. Your attention span has really gone to hell and it needs work.
Yeah. I know some even older people who, when I say older, I mean they're not like Gen Z or Gen X or something like that, where they have gotten to the point where like the most they can do is they maybe can finish a newspaper article
Wow.
or like a New Yorker article, but can't remember the last time they read or even listened to a whole book. And I'm like, okay, that's not, that doesn't sound real healthy.
And that's scary, isn't it?
Hmm.
Yeah. Or think about people who play cards like bridge. And that takes an awful lot of concentration to play bridge. And now people, they don't have the capacity to do it anymore. They can't concentrate, they can't focus.
Yeah, that's sad. It really is. Are there any other suggestions uh, to get towards a healthier brain in dealing with our
Well,
screen addictions?
I would say there were two that I recommend, and these are what I recommend to my medical students from day one. First of all is go to bed.
Hmm.
You've heard me, go to bed and get some sleep, because sleep is the best restorative on earth. And so go to bed at a regular time, get up at a regular time, and you will discover all sorts of wonderful benefits. If you need to give a presentation in the morning or something like that, don't stay up late. Front load it, set an alarm clock early, 4 or 5 a.m., and practice your stuff early in the morning, because otherwise you're going to rob yourself of the deepest stage 4 sleep and the REM sleep, in which you dream, which is the most restorative. So I would say one is go to bed. And what was the other recommendation you wanted me to do? Is the other thing would be go outside for a walk. Uh, just put everything down and go outside and take a walk. Walking is a great restorative. The Dutch have a phrase called Nixon, which is basically means doing nothing. And so that means looking out the window, looking at the trees, looking at the clouds, listening to the birds, doing nothing for just 30 seconds. It doesn't take much. So do Nixon, but also go outside, because being outside in green spaces is marvelously restorative. I have a whole chapter on this, is silence is an essential nutrient, and why green spaces are enormously restorative. And it doesn't take you being in a forest anywhere. You can just sit under a tree in a park in the middle of the city, and that's enough. These plants are putting off phytochemicals, which influence our mood and our attitude. And everybody know. I don't need to tell you this. Everybody knows that nature is restorative. Go take a walk on the beach or in the mountains or on a trail somewhere, and you're going to feel so much better. I don't need to tell you this. It's so evident. It's so self-evident.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Sometimes I'm lucky enough for now to be living right near water, even though I'm in an
Oh,
urban environment. So I can go very easily from typical urban environment to sit like on a park bench and look at water.
wow. How
And it's
nice.
amazing, even if it's just a few minutes, it's very, as you said, restorative and also triggers imagination, like a different type of thinking
Yes,
that I
it does.
just
Yes,
do
it
not
does.
get
Because
from.
your mind is looking at the water and the ripples and the waves, and it's not thinking about anything. And this is part of Nixon, is that you're not thinking about anything. And so when you're not thinking about anything, your subconscious is churning away with all sorts of ideas. I mean, this is one thing that I do on my own. I mean, I've done meditation for decades now. I do Soto Zen, which is the serene reflection school of Zen, which means that you neither try to think nor not to think. You just sort of stare at the wall or the floor, and you just let thoughts come up. And I confess that I cheat, because when I do this, I put a legal pad next to my side with a pen, because I know that when I do this, I'm going to have all sorts of wonderful ideas that I never would have thought about otherwise. And so I've got to jot them down quickly. So I guess I'm a meditation cheat. I know that. It's
Well, doctor, I hope you don't mind. Can we, since we're doing this like the day after a very
Oh,
short
yes.
but seemingly long, stressful election cycle, uh, what is the solution to, man, hit those screens again and binge as much news as you can, or get on your phone and see how
So
people
are you asking how to handle the stress after the
Yes.
election?
Yes, because everybody's reaction is the opposite to
Well,
agree.
half the population is going to be is upset. So I think the first thing is to realize that our fellow citizens are upset, and to acknowledge that. The other thing is that if you're so freaked out over this, um, then it's not the election, it's not the external events that are making you freaked out. It's you who are making yourself freaked out. You are the one who are making yourself all upset. And so the solution is, don't do that. Don't make yourself upset. Why are you upset? Why do you insist on calling the other side evil and hateful and blah blah? I mean, the the invective is just incredible, where we insist that the other side is just evil and awful and all that, instead of saying, "Gee, what if I understood where the other side is coming from?" Because this is the fascinating thing, is that all the people that say, "Oh, these people are awful," well, have you actually talked to any of these awful people? Do you actually know what they say? Do you know what their stories are, what their backgrounds are? And the answer is no. So we're caught in this abstract battle of one side against the other. So
But in terms of technology,
yeah,
I had so many friends that would say, "Oh, you know what? At some point, I was so anxious, I had to just put down my phone or turn off the TV or look away from my computer and do something totally different."
well, that's a good response. I think that's an
Right.
excellent
And I
response.
think it's kind of like maybe we should be doing that related to technology all the time, like being very self-aware when it's not healthy anymore.
I think that's an excellent response, is that you have to realize that this stuff is making me crazy. It's a, the technology, the iPhone in my hand is the most incredible machine ever. It's better than anything Star Tech could ever come up with. And yet at the same time, it's a narcotizing agent. And it can become uh, a negative agent. And so I think you're right, is that to be able to say, enough, I've had it. This isn't giving me any more pleasure anymore. It's stopped to be useful. So I'm just going to put it down for a while. I'm going to put it face down, or better yet, I'm going to turn it off for a couple hours, And so what? If I turn it off for a couple hours, what am I going to miss? Am I going to miss anything earth shattering in terms of news? I doubt it. But what's going to happen is that you'll give yourself a few hours of peace and rest and restoration from all of it.
Yeah, I think those have been really good pieces of advice that you've been giving as far as taking a break from being self-aware of and limiting and balancing things. It's no surprise. And I think maybe as we were talking about generationally there being differences, I think maybe for maybe younger people, because it's all they've ever known, it's harder for them to really be self-aware and take those breaks because it just seems like such a normal part of life. And as you mentioned earlier, it's going to impact not only your lifestyle but your brain and the way it's supposed to function.
Yeah,
So
I think for younger people, it really just is a disconnect between how they see themselves and how they imagine the world, and they can't imagine a world without these devices.
mm, yeah, very interesting, very alarming. Thank you for sharing all this with us. Is there anything else, about your book as far as the writing process? What's next for you? I know you're going to you tend to stay in your lane, which we're grateful for. Your lane is very specific, and we're so glad to have you in it.
No, my lane isn't all that specific. I'm about to leave in a few days for the VCCA Artist Colony in Amherst, Virginia, where I'll spend 4 weeks working on my next book with a collaborator, Barbara Bellman, called What She Saw, and it's a murder suspense thriller. It's a fiction book. So,
Really?
which involves murder and poison and synesthesia and explosions and all sorts of marvelous stuff there. So no, I don't stick in my lane. I'm all over the place. What can I say? I'm like an egg that's dropped on the sidewalk. I go splat.
That's amazing. Do you love that? Is that like a wonderful departure for you? Going in
No,
the world
no,
of
well,
fiction?
I listen, I've written since the seventh grade and for pay since I was at Duke University. So no, it's not a departure. It's just it's like, I review for the New York Journal of Books, and editors wanted to corral me into reviewing medical books. And I said, I don't want to review medical books. Forget it. I'm tired of that. And so I would review historical fiction, and I mean, I would review everything under the sun. And they were like so surprised that I had such an eclectic taste. You know, historical fiction, science fiction, uh, poetry, you name it. I would do it. So I would just think that life is too short to pigeonhole yourself in any one category.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, well, but for now, I'm glad you did with this one because it's such a helpful book. And so many of us don't, we just kind of accept what comes to us as far as our
mm,
screens and technology and thinking that this is actually good because it is progressive and technology. But I think um, you're kind of putting out a warning that no, not everything about it is great and you need to be aware of it.
yeah, the tech industry has always said that, oh, all this stuff is an unalloyed wonder. It's fantastic. It's fabulous. And it's like, and critics have said, wait a minute, maybe it's not so fabulous. Maybe there are downsides to it. And anybody who dared to say there was a downside to it was criticized as a Luddite or a technophobe. And the criticism against it was just enormous. I've got colleagues of mine have written a marvelous book called Screen School. There are two teachers in Fairfax, Virginia public schools who wrote about what the damage that all this technology is doing. And you know what? Their colleagues just shun them and criticize them and blame them for calling attention to the damages that these devices were doing to the young people in their screens. So
Well,
it's
thank you for sounding the alarm and and arming us with information. Yes, yes. And I want to thank our audience for joining us today, whether you're live or you're going to be watching this later. And feel free to share the link with friends and family. And it's important information, it's practical information. And thank you so much for this.
my
Uh,
pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
and honestly, we have plenty of copies of today's featured book, Your Stone Age
Aha.
Brain in the Screen Age, and we have them in both our stores in San Francisco and Corte Madera. Feel free to come in and get a copy, or this is the positive technology, Dr. Richard. You can actually click on the link below of what you're watching right now on YouTube, and you can order a copy of the book. So
Okay.
that is a positive of technology that Book Passage will embrace. But you will
Some
want to,
technology is wonderful.
yes, and you will want to order the book, read the book, buy the book, read it from cover to cover. How about that? And
Please
pass it.
do. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Well, actually, I found it to be where I was putting post-it notes, in certain sections that really stood out to me.
How
And
old-fashioned. I love it.
I know, but I'm a
Mm.
very tactile, so I also like to use highlights and things like
I
that.
know. I underline in books I own all the
Yeah,
time. It's
yeah.
like,
It helps me remember too. So that's something with the brain here,
yes, it
maybe.
does.
Yeah.
Because when you do that, you're remembering a place where you read it, and it
Yeah.
helps you remember it later on.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Doctor, and thank you to our Book Passage audience. Until the next time, do buy a book and read it from cover to cover. And thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.